So this is not going to be the kind of video that I typically make. This is not the video that I want to make. I feel like it's the video that I have to make. Before we start, subscribe, hit the bell, do the thing. So everybody kind of starts out their relationships with these very high expectations, right? We all kind of have this idea of how we want our relationships to go, and usually those expectations are very idealistic, happy marriage, good relationship, connected, lots and lots of intimacy, fun and excitement. But we all know the reality. The reality is, far different than what our expectations typically are. I've probably said that relationships take work thousands of times in my career. There's a point where I stopped working with couples because I realized that the real work to improve a relationship needs to be done individually. The relationship's dysfunction is because of each individual's dysfunction. While I knew that logically, I wasn't living that. I was naively believing that I had my shit together. And I came to realize that my ego was telling me that I was a good therapist. I know that I'm a good father. I know that I'm a good husband. I was highly educated, and I consistently worked to develop my therapy skills. But the truth was that I was kind of asleep at the wheel in my marriage. And I discovered that I had significant blind spots to my own patterns that were running our relationship off into a ditch. Admitting this is embarrassing, but it's true. So how did I begin to wake up? That's what this video is about. 2020 was the year of COVID. We were all hunkered down with our children. We have 3 kids. And during that time, it was pretty scary. There was a lot of uncertainty. We're trying to navigate, not really knowing what was going to happen and, how we were going to make sure that we all stayed healthy. It was a tough time. On top of that, it was also a tough time for me in business. I'm running a business, and that business depended on people being in the office to do therapy. And my brother is my business partner. He's a chiropractor. So people obviously have to have their hands on another human being to do chiropractic adjustments. So there was a lot of uncertainty during that time. This was also a time when my wife had sort of an awakening. This led to a lot of talks about the quality of our relationship. And, we would do a lot of walking and talking in the neighborhood because it was just the 2 of us. So from my perspective, I knew that, our relationship wasn't 100%. I didn't think that there was any real huge problems in our relationship. We were compatible, we were very much in love. And I thought we were a really good match in our side of our relationship. But through her awakening, she started to see how much hurt she was suppressing and how I had a dysfunctional pattern of behavior that had existed basically since the beginning of our relationship. And the more we talked, the more I had to come face to face with my own behavior and how it made her feel. The guilt and the shame of it was crushing, honestly. And for the first time in nearly 20 years, I felt the fear of uncertainty of having a future together. Fast forward to September of 2021. My mom had been suffering from Alzheimer's for about 5 years. And my brother and I were at the office, and my brother got a phone call from my dad. And he said that my mom had collapsed. We rushed over to their home to find the paramedics working on my mom, doing CPR, but no success. Watching all of that happening in front of me was surreal. I felt numb. I felt shocked. And the next few months were probably the lowest period of time in my entire life. So this was a time of serious reflection and contemplation. In therapy, people talk about breaking down and feeling raw. And this was about as raw as I've ever felt. It was my turn now. I felt like the facade of, what I thought, who I thought myself to be, was suddenly collapsing. And I had to come face to face with myself. I had to drop my ego and stop bullshitting myself. So I had to open this curtain up to reveal, who I really am, which is something that we all have to do at some point or another in our lives. If we have a growth mindset, we have to, face ourselves. And I had to sit there and take a really hard, long look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the shame and the guilt that I felt is that I always have kind of, seen myself as this person who was insightful and very self-aware. But the reality is that when I get upset and frustrated, I get domineering and rigid and demanding. And, I tend to have this parental tone with people. I want things to be my way. Now, I know through that self-reflection and through the conversations with my wife that this created a fear response inside of my wife, where she was walking on eggshells and I was making her feel afraid of my reactions. This behavior, I would rationalize it. I would say things like, I was just angry. And I would try to minimize or deflect, how I acted when I was upset. Well, I know now, and stupidly should have known that I was invalidating her feelings, her experience. I was claiming innocence, like that's not my intention. I didn't mean to, blah, 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 blah. All in a way of trying to kind of like give her the message that you're making too big of a deal about this. You're too sensitive. It's shameful. It's regretful. I feel plain fucking awful about my behavior, in my relationship, because I know better. The truth is that this behavior is emotionally abusive. I know that logically, but the facade of who I saw myself as wasn't allowing me to see this pattern. I was in denial. There's no doubt about it. I was depending on her to forgive me. I was depending on her to look the other way, be very understanding, know that I was just upset and I didn't really mean what I said, because I never actually really intended to hurt my wife. But all of that negated and invalidated her feelings and her experience. Letting myself see this pattern was the first step in me transforming myself. And I knew that I just did not want to continue to be this way. I felt desperate, honestly, to change myself. I knew how it felt to be shamed and guilted and criticized and made to feel like I couldn't do anything right. That's how I grew up. I had very loving parents. My parents loved me. They loved me and my siblings. But they also had this kind of parenting style that was very 1970s, very 1980s. It's like growing up feeling kind of dominated, criticized, in some ways or another. When I became an adult, I promised myself that I was not going to do to my kids or to my wife what I felt was done to me unfairly. And yet, here we are. I know how this works. And yet I was blind to it myself. This is humbling, to say the least. The psychologist in me was literally in awe of how undeniably powerful our programming is and how our dysfunction can fly right under the radar and because our defenses prevent us from seeing it. This also turned into a mission for me, an absolute dedicated mission to help as many people as possible who feel or has felt as desperate as I did to transform themselves, and to create a program that can be used by countless people to help them come face to face with their own dysfunction and to show them the way out. So since then, I've turned my guilt and my shame into something useful, this program, something I can feel proud of. I made meaning from this struggle and suffering that I unwittingly caused. I'm actively working to help my wife heal. and to stay consistent with keeping that dysfunctional side of me from ever showing its ugly face again. And I haven't been perfect at it, but it's a work in progress. I've been obsessed with this work since that period of time. And I want to help as many men and women as possible so they can face their own dysfunction and take responsibility for cleaning up the messes that their dysfunctional patterns create in their relationships. Just like me, I was sabotaging my relationship without even knowing it. Now I have a completely new appreciation for what doing the work actually means. I feel that my words and my actions are integrated, and I feel authentic in what I'm doing. No more bullshitting, no more ego, no more controlling behavior, no more hiding. I'm doing this to free myself from all of that. I'm also doing this to free my partner and my kids and to break these dysfunctional patterns that have held me back my entire life. Ultimately, we need to feel free in our relationships, free from fear, free from pain, especially from the people who claim to love us the most. Free to be ourselves, to express, to create, to have our needs, our wants, our desires fulfilled in a relationship of safety and security. Each of us needs to feel valued, respected, and loved. There is nothing better, believe me, than feeling authentic, to know yourself and to transform your dysfunction into growth. It's not about being perfect. God knows I'm not. It's about being flawed. It's about knowing that those flaws help kind of lead the way towards getting better each day, bit by bit, to finally feel at peace with yourself and at peace with the people that you love. Designing a relationship that works for you and your partner, not against it. Thanks for listening to this. This was hard to admit. I feel like it was, again, something necessary that I needed to do because I want to feel very authentic and I want people to know that I've been there. I've been through it. And the videos that I make are a lot of the videos that I needed to hear 20 some years ago. So if I can add a little bit of extra into your life each week with some of this information, my hope is that you can take the information that I'm giving to you and you can put it to good use to break free from your dysfunctional patterns. I also know that if you need help, my program can help you. Please schedule a discovery call and watch this video next.